Headed to SoFi Stadium? Skip the traffic and ride the Culver City Bus Line 99, the SoFi Express, your direct $2 base fare round-trip ride from the Culver City Transit Center at Westfield, Culver City. Buses run on weekend game days every 20 minutes starting 3 hours before kickoff, with return service beginning at the start of the third quarter. And guess what else? We're hiring. Join our team and help keep the community moving. Visit culvercitybus.com or call 310-253-6500 for info on your next ride to the game or maybe your next job.
Good afternoon. We're doing it live, getting right down to business here, doing more at 4 weekday afternoons, right after Guy Benson at 3, and just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek On Money, live on the air, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com, and yes, the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple iTunes, YouTube, all of your favorite podcast platforms. Well, we had Black Friday, we had Cyber Monday, Giving Tuesday. Today's known as Weeping Wednesday. That's because of the builds that arrive after all of that spending. In the meantime, it was not a Weeping Wednesday on Wall Street, with stocks racking up back-to-back gains today after an unexpectedly weak jobs report. Private sector hiring report came in weaker than expected, and this now solidifying expectations for another rate cut by the Federal Reserve next week. The Dow Jones Industrial Average came in for a closing gain of 408 points to 47,883, up just a whisker below 48,000 again, and just below its record high. In fact, the Dow's close today is racked up as the third highest closing level in Dow Jones Industrial history. We did see the S&P 500 close up 20 points at 6,850, and the NASDAQ gained 40 points at 23,454. Cryptos bouncing around, and looks like in the plus column today, once again, looks like Bitcoin's at around 93.5 at the moment. ETH is close to 3,200 once again. Doge has rebounded to 15 cents. The tech names once again in focus, with Apple hitting another record high. Another big story here, President Trump insists that the U.S. was at war with the list of drug cartels in Venezuela as the U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean continues. The president making his latest comments this afternoon at a White House press availability, claiming there was popular support for his decision to use military assets instead of law enforcement capabilities to fight drug trafficking in the Caribbean, Central America, and South America. We'll talk more about that coming up here shortly. The price of oil and all this, of course, Venezuela, big oil producer, still holding around $59 a barrel. We're watching that number very closely as well. Bitcoin on the rebound today. It got as low as 84,000 on Monday, now back to around, as I mentioned, 93.5 here at last check. The earnings parade continues. Macy's, speaking of parades, delivering another strong earnings report, which included a surprise growth number in some of their sales metrics. Macy's shares in the spotlight today. Marvell also in the spotlight. And in the business of show business, we see Netflix and Paramount Skydance now among the likely winners in the fight to buy Warner Brothers Discovery. Investors treating them as the losers, though, on Wednesday today, as the share prices for both Netflix and Paramount Skydance pulled back by more than 5%. We're watching that along with the Wall Street Journal reports here. Shares of Netflix falling to an 8-month low after it was reported the company had made an all-cash bid to buy Warner Brothers Discovery's studio and streaming businesses as a second-round bid deadline passed on Monday. What's really going on with the economy, trade, tariffs, and the whole works these days? We'll find out later this hour with prominent Los Angeles area economist Kevin KLOWDEN, Chief Global Strategist and Executive Director at Milken Institute Finance, based right here in Southern California. It's hard to believe it's been nearly a full year now since the devastating firestorms hit Malibu, the Palisades, and Altadena. And coming up later this hour, I'll be speaking live to someone on the front line of the recovery effort, and that is RAUL ANAYA, longtime president and leader of business banking for Bank of America here in Southern California, nowadays heading up B of A's Fire Disaster Recovery Initiative, including the new B of A Rebuild Solution. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, a giant in the financial world. Delighted to say we're joined live now by the one and only Steve Forbes, chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, which includes Forbes magazine, co-author of the book Inflation, What It Is, Why It Is Bad, How to Fix It, former Republican presidential candidate. And, of course, very grateful to have you as a guest here, Steve Forbes, over many, many years. Thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Thanks for taking the call.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Let me get your reaction to the breaking news here. President Trump insists that the U.S. was at war. That's the word war with a list of drug cartels in Venezuela as the military buildup in the Caribbean continues. What's your reaction to that and the latest developments there in the Caribbean?
Well, I think it's very clear one way or the other Maduro in Venezuela has to go. The challenge is, how is he going to do it? If Maduro survives this, that'll be a huge setback to the prestige of the United States after putting all of those military assets there, and also sends the wrong message to our adversaries, whether in Russia or in China. So I hope they've thought through how they're going to get rid of Maduro, because otherwise we put too much in. Now he's got to go. How they do it, that's the big question.
On there live with Steve Forbes, one of the front page articles in the Wall Street Journal today says in Venezuela people are more afraid of runaway inflation than President Trump. Venezuelans, they say, shrugging off threats to oust their leader and more concerned about the price of Christmas presents and decorations. I know you wrote the book on inflation. They're talking about runaway inflation. Venezuela's been dealing with that for many years.
Yes, they have. It's been chronic since Maduro took office, seized office. As you know, a year ago in 2024, they had an election. He rigged it, but all the observers there said his opponent, she beat him by a margin of 2-1. And so people have no affinity for this guy at all unless they work directly for him or for the army. And so, yes, they're worried about inflation. They're worried about shortages. And they would actually welcome his downfall and have come in a democratically elected government that will start to get the economy back on its feet.
On there live with Steve Forbes. Speaking of inflation, how are we doing here in this country? And what about gold kissing record highs again recently, and silver also popping to all-time highs?
Yes, the jump in silver has been remarkable. It's been depressed for year after year after year. And nominally, it finally got above $50, which it hadn't touched since the late 1970s. And I think what that underscores is the basic weakness of the dollar. Other currencies around the world are almost as bad as the dollar. And that's why that gets to the whole issue of the Federal Reserve. The Fed, unfortunately, doesn't pay enough attention to the basic integrity and value of the dollar. And so I think that spells trouble down the road. It will be interesting to see who the president appoints to succeed Jerome Powell, and maybe we'll get a positive change in the Federal Reserve, but we'll get a change. But whether they focus on the integrity of the dollar is key. Otherwise, you see in the price of gold, see in the price of silver, we will have inflation down the road. And the way you fight it is by not depressing the economy, which the Fed believes is the way to do it. You do it by making clear you want a stable value for the dollar. And so you don't print too much money, you don't print too little money. But the Federal Reserve hasn't practiced good monetary policy, unfortunately, for years, which is why we've had such trouble for most of this century with the dollar.
On there live with Steve Forbes. Not only did silver blow past 50, as you properly mentioned, hadn't seen that since the late 70s, 1980 or thereabouts. It's close to $60 an ounce now, so we're watching that very, very closely. Gold right now above 4,200. It got up to around 4,500 not too long ago, and so we are watching that very closely, as well as the cryptos. Are you paying more attention to what's happening with Bitcoin and the other cryptos these days?
Well, this is a real test for the cryptos, especially for Bitcoin. We have a lot of others out there. I think what it shows is that people see it as a speculative vehicle. One, the blockchain technology allows you to easily transfer money around the world, which if you're living in a country like Venezuela, it's nice to be able to get a transfer from overseas without the government being able to seize it. But I think the thing to watch for in the future are what they call stable coins that are tied to either the dollar or something like gold. And I think the time will come in a few years where these will develop in a way where they'll pose a real threat to weak government currencies, a challenge government monopoly of currencies. They haven't quite gotten it there yet in terms of both the technology and the ease of use and the trust, transparency. but that is going to come. So with Bitcoin, I've always enjoyed watching it, but that's one roller coaster I think I'm going to stay away from.
All right, what's the Fed going to do next week, and who is going to be the next Fed chair? Kevin Hassett's name has been mentioned, and looks like President Trump appears to be leaning to naming Kevin Hassett as director of the National Economic Council as the next Fed chair. Those are the signals that we've been getting from the White House over the past week, and the market seems to like that idea. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think the Fed will cut rates, not nearly enough, but they will do it. And because there is enough uncertainty about the economy. But in terms of the successor, yes, Kevin Hassett's name has been mentioned a lot, or certainly bandied about, and he has the trust of the president. He's one of the very few people who had a real position in the first Trump administration, who got an even better position in the second Trump administration. And so the president trusts him. But I still think that there's a possibility, since the president has now announced, or his people have announced, that he may not reveal his choice until the turn of the year in January. If he has a choice, why not reveal it now? But I think there's a chance that that Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, would be appointed head of the Fed, and Kevin Hassett would become the new Treasury Secretary. But President Trump loves to keep people waiting, loves surprises. So I rule out nothing, or rule in nothing.
See it tonight, read about it tomorrow, but hear it now on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC, speaking live to Steve Forbes. What about the other thing that's out there, a Supreme Court ruling on tariffs, whether they're legal and what could happen here, and the potential impact here of the U.S. government the Treasury Department having to refund $1 trillion in tariffs? When are we going to get a ruling, and what do you think is going to happen?
I think we'll get a ruling soon, just because of the uncertainty out there. I still believe the Supreme Court is going to rule that over half of those tariffs are illegal because they're done by executive order. Tariff is a tax. Only Congress can pass taxes. The other tariffs were done through a legal process established in law, so those will hold. As for the refunds, I think you'll see some pretty good gymnastics by the legal profession, or the lawyers inside the Supreme Court. Well, in effect, they'll say the past is past, the money's collected, but in the future you can't collect the money. I don't think they're going to demand a refund. I think they'll shut off the avenue for lawsuits, just because it would be so messy and so destructive. It's going to be hard enough politically to rule the tariffs unconstitutional, which I think they are. But the fact that it's been done so late in the day, a lot has been done. And so I think the Supreme Court will in effect say the past is past, but in the future, you want a tariff like that, you got to go through Congress.
On there live with Steve Forbes. Getting back to geopolitics here and back to Venezuela for a moment. If, in fact, the U.S. does take some sort of military action directly against Venezuela, how do you think that's going to play out with Venezuela's close allies, China, Cuba, also, and even Russia?
Well, the Cubans are there. The Maduro, is the dictator, trusts only the Cubans now. He doesn't trust his own security people. And so the Cubans are, in effect, in charge. And in terms of Russia and China, I think the Russians right now have enough on their hands with Ukraine in negotiations with the U.S., and the Chinese want to reach some sort of agreement on tariffs. So I think right now the dictator in Venezuela is on his own. The Cubans will try to make sure nobody near him does him in, but I don't think at the end of the day that's going to save Maduro's government. There'll be a change. I just don't know how they have scoped it out or how they do it. But there will be a change, or else the United States and the president are going to lose an immense amount of credibility. You don't go and put that many military assets there, make that many threats, and not follow through, then they'll just think the president, in effect, is a paper tiger. And that's where you get situations where our adversaries make a misjudgment and leads to a kind of crisis that none of us want.
Kind of reminds me what happened, I believe it was 1989, right, when the U.S. went into Panama, when the Panamanian dictator at the time declared war on the U.S., banged a machete on the podium there, and over the holidays back under the first President Bush, the U.S. Toppled Noriega, and he ultimately stood trial on drug charges and was jailed for life here.
That's right. And in 1994, in a very different situation, President Clinton at the time sent in forces in Haiti, removed the dictator at the time, and reinstalled a figure who had actually been elected a few years before. So interventions do happen. And the fact that the president says it's a war, the fact that Maduro is up to his eyeballs in drug dealing, I think he has to follow through, which makes very strange, by the way, his pardoning the former head of Honduras, a notorious drug dealer. I still haven't figured that one out, the real rationale for that.
Very interesting. How was the Macy's parade this year? And on a lighter note, how's the holiday season there in New York with the new mayor about to take office?
I think people are wondering where it's going to go. He's keeping the current police commissioner, who's been very effective, but we'll see whether he just keeps her there as a figurehead and undermines her. But I hope he realizes that he's got a big socialist agenda, very open about it. But if you let crime go up, if people feel that things are deteriorating in public, the rest isn't going to matter. That's going to be a huge liability. And we have New York has a governor's election in 2026. And under New York law, the governor can remove a mayor of a city like New York if the governor deems that a crisis is there. And usually, I don't think it's ever been done, but if it's seen as something, if there's corruption or some other hideous scandal, you can make a change. In the past, when that's happened, it happened in the late 40s. They usually engineer the removal of the mayor. Not to go back in history, but in the late 40s, there was a mayor who was guilty as heck as corruption. And before anything could be done, the Truman administration arranged for him to resign and become ambassador to Mexico. So maybe Mondami will become ambassador to the Bahamas or something if he messes up on the crime front.
That's very interesting. I had not heard about that, but that is very interesting. How would you size up the New York gubernatorial race with Elise Stefanik now in the race? She, of course, got international attention when she put her foot down against anti-Semitism at U.S. college campuses in recent years. Well, how would you size up the governor's race there?
Well, she's the front runner, but also there is a county executive in Nassau County, a very large county, critical county, a fellow named Bruce Blakeman, Republican, won a decisive re-election there, went against the anti-Republican trend that we saw in New York and elsewhere in the country, and so he may run. So we'll see how that shapes up. Elise Stefanik has gotten a lot of publicity nationally, but Blakeman is seen as somebody who's demonstrated real competence in an area that is very much of a swing area, and won decisively at a time when Republicans were not doing very well. So, as they say used to say in TV land, stay tuned.
Absolutely, and Radio Land, I might add. That's absolutely something we say here too. Any new books coming out?
Looking at projects, looking at a couple of subjects. But I remember years ago an author saying, "Don't say you're going to do something until it's done in the writing world." Because you
Excellent.
Don't want to say you're going to do something and don't do it. So wait till it's done, and then you can proclaim it.
I think it was Carlos Fuentes who said, writing is a battle against silence. That's another one that I recall. And one of these days, I've got to put pen to paper, too. You've inspired me over many, many years. Steve Forbes, in the meantime, we'll go back to your book, Inflation, What It Is, Why It Is Bad, and How to Fix It, and all your other great writings over many, many years. Steve Forbes, thank you very, very much for joining us live. I wish you a wonderful holiday season and hope to speak with you again very soon.
You too, Frank. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Steve Forbes, Chairman and Editor-in-Chief of Forbes Media, which, of course, includes Forbes Magazine. Live with us here on Mottek On Money on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here, 790 KABC. Good afternoon. Stocks on the rebound for the second day in a row. Cryptos, too. The Dow up 408 points at 47,883, up knocking on 48K once again. And looks like we just saw the third highest closing level for the Dow in history today, with the Dow now less than 1% below the record high of 48,255, which we set back on November 18th. The S&P 500 up 20 points at 6850, and the Nasdaq up 40 points at 23,454. The yield on the 10-year note now at 4.06%. Price of gold moving higher, above 4,200 today, 4,235 and change. Silver is below $59 an ounce here, up 30 cents at the moment at 58.92. Taking a look at Bitcoin right now, up about 600 at 93,570 or so. Ethereum up 20 at 51, make that 3,188. Solana at 145. Doge at the moment at 15 cents. Checking the crypto ETFs, BITO up slightly to 1373. IBIT up $1.07 at 52.74. Strategy up more than 7 today at 188 and change. And now the latest news on 790 KBC.
Headed to SoFi Stadium? Skip the traffic and ride the Culver City Bus Line 99, the SoFi Express, your direct $2 base fare round-trip ride from the Culver City Transit Center at Westfield, Culver City. Buses run on weekend game days every 20 minutes starting 3 hours before kickoff, with return service beginning at the start of the third quarter. And guess what else? We're hiring. Join our team and help keep the community moving. Visit culvercitybus.com or call 310-253-6500 for info on your next ride to the game or maybe your next job.
Hey everybody, I'm Michael Strahan, and St. Jude has been close to my heart for many years. Their groundbreaking research is changing how the world treats childhood cancer and has helped push the survival rate in the U.S. from 20% to more than 80%. Please help St. Jude give children the greatest gift, a chance at a lifetime.
This holiday, help St. Jude find more cures for more children. Donate now at musicgives.org.
The United States Soccer Federation presents the U.S. Soccer Podcast.
A chance to show people a little bit behind the curtain.
Kling, what are we in for?
Such a fun time, so much energy, and you get to actually see people react to the storytelling.
We cover a wide range of topics.
The whole reason we started was we loved playing when we were kids.
I mean, I still got that spark in me.
There you go. But I don't know how you can leave not being a bigger fan.
The U.S. Soccer Podcast. Goal for goal! Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Sluggish news on the economy set off a rally on Wall Street today. Expectations now that the Fed will very likely cut interest rates at their big meeting next week. The Dow closing up 408 points, putting it just below its record high at 47,883. What is really going on with the economy, jobs, business, trade, tariffs, and the whole works? Let's find out now with prominent Los Angeles area economist Kevin KLOWDEN, Chief Global Strategist and Executive Director at Milken Institute Finance, based right here in Southern California. Kevin KLOWDEN, thank you very much for coming to the line here this afternoon.
My pleasure, Frank.
Wonderful to have you with us. It's been a while since we chatted behind the live microphones. Give us your view of what's happening these days with this latest report from ADP coming in weaker than expected. And, of course, a lot of concerns about tariffs and the Supreme Court ruling possibly coming up soon, and the whole works here now.
Well, to some extent, there's a lot tied together. There's a lot of uncertainty that's particularly hitting small businesses. There's a lot of uncertainty about supply chains, about the cost of goods that they're importing, about what's going on in terms of their overall exposure that's really been filtering down. And in some ways, this kind of jobs report has been coming for a while, but there have been a few things that have also kicked in that people don't pay as much attention to. One of them is, in fact, the elimination of the de minimis exemption. So that exemption, which was blocked from China and Hong Kong months ago because of, Temu and Shein and the various Chinese importers, that $800 exemption on imports is now filtered into a whole bunch of small business supply chains. And it really has an effect on a lot of these companies that they might, whether they're craft businesses, they're smaller retailers and everything like that. And that has been filtering through as a factor, but also just the general uncertainty about tariffs, the general uncertainty about prices, and about consumers and just how much they're willing to spend. And we saw some really good news, or at least potentially good news, around the amount of spending that was done online for Black Friday. But that doesn't necessarily seem to have translated into the same kind of good news for small businesses for the last couple months.
On there live with economist Kevin KLOWDEN. What do you think is going to happen when the Supreme Court ultimately does rule on the tariffs? And might the Treasury have to refund $1 trillion at some point?
Well, there's some good questions about that because there, based on the arguments that we've seen, it seems likely that they will rule against the tariffs. We don't know that. But the thing is that the Treasury Secretary Bessent has said, look, the tariff policy is there. There are two other different measures that the president can use to actually implement tariffs outside of the mechanism that was being used right now. And one of them, if you want to go all the way back to the Great Depression, is actually based off of the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, and so which is still technically in force and could be used. So there, if the tariffs get ruled against, we don't know that the Supreme Court will actually rule that the money has to be refunded. We aren't certain of that. There was some skepticism even raised about that mechanism and everything, and by the justices in terms of the arguments. So we don't know. And even as I said, even if they get ruled against, the fact remains that the government will step in very quickly to try and implement others. And we're not sure, if those refunds happen, who do they go to? How does, do they go back to consumers who have seen their prices go up? Do they just go back to the businesses? And what does that say more broadly in terms of government revenue and everything like that?
On there live with Kevin KLOWDEN, of course, at the Milken Institute. You hold the premier discussions on all things finance and geopolitics as well. And we heard today from President Trump insisting that the U.S. was at war with a list of drug cartels in Venezuela as a U.S. military buildup is happening in the Caribbean. We're watching that unfold here at the moment. The price of oil, meanwhile, is held fairly steady at around $59 a barrel. What about what's happening there? Any expectations here on how this might play out if the U.S. does take military action directly against Venezuela, how this might impact China, which, of course, is a big ally of Venezuela, and the oil markets, and a lot of things could happen if ultimately the U.S. goes in there?
Well, we don't know. I mean, this is a big thing. We don't know what scale the U.S. is going to go in. We don't know what's going to be particularly done. The main thing that we know is anytime there is an action, anytime there is anything going forward in terms of the oil markets, is that they don't like, especially in the short term, any threats to disruptions. They don't like any of that. This has been true regardless of which country is involved, regardless of anything else. As far as the various countries go, well, if there's a disruption to Venezuela, and it's worth remembering that, on top of everything else, Venezuela refines most of its oil in the United States. They actually refine that oil in through Citgo, which is a completely, which the Venezuelan government actually completely owns, but they do it in refineries largely in the U.S., and so it could create disruptions locally. It could create disruptions otherwise. Beyond that, it's anybody's guess, because the U.S. has made it clear that something is likely. They've given the warnings to the FAA, has given warnings about the flight, all that, but they're being very they're being close to the vest about what the level and what would be the targets or anything like that. And that you might see a short-term spike, but there's a real question of, what does it mean long-term? And that is not something that's easy to understand.
Watching it very, very closely as this unfolds. And in the meantime, closer to home, we'll be speaking to RAUL ANAYA very shortly, a well-known name, I'm sure, to you. Very big name in the world of finance here, as president of Bank of America for this region for many years, and now leading the B of A's financial recovery following the firestorms. Hard to believe it was nearly a full year ago now that The firestorms devastated parts of Malibu, the Palisades, as well as Altadena. I know you've also been very much involved in assessing the economic impact of all of this. Nearly one full year into this now. Give us your assessment of this recovery effort.
Well, we've been seeing some recovery and some resilience in terms of the spike that we saw in terms of the home prices, especially in rentals that we saw coming out initially. There's been some recovery from that, but the fact is that even in areas, whether in Altadena or the Palisades, where they've been able to move forward, this is still a huge impact in terms of commerce. This is a huge impact, obviously, in terms of homes. This is in communities, and rebuilding those communities is going to take some time. And even with some of the strongest efforts that have been spearheaded, whether ones led by RAUL and ANAYA, whether ones led by Rick Caruso, and even what the Milken Institute has been doing in terms of looking at it from a long-term standpoint, from insurance and in making these viable, sustainable recoveries. That's taking a while to play out. And one of the things that people don't focus on is the extent to which there have been real ripple effects on the retail in other sectors, in restaurants and so on, even the places that weren't actually in those communities, where if you go back, you look at the reports in the areas around Altadena where retail and food continued to be impacted by the loss of all that customer base. Santa Monica, has actually had a really devastating impact because of the loss of all the people who used to come down from the Palisades to shop in Santa Monica who don't anymore because they've all dispersed elsewhere. So we have to recognize that recovery isn't just those communities, it's all the surrounding communities as well.
That is an excellent point, and we'll continue to follow this with you as we get closer to the actual one-year anniversary coming up just less than about a month from now, actually. Economist Kevin KLOWDEN, wish we had more time as always, but we'll have to stop there. Los Angeles area prominent economist Kevin KLOWDEN, Chief Global Strategist and Executive Director at Milken Institute Finance, which happens to be based in Santa Monica. Kevin KLOWDEN, we wish you and everybody there a wonderful holiday season and hope to speak with you again very, very soon.
Absolutely, Frank, and hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I hope you have a much better holidays going forward.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Kevin KLOWDEN live with us here on Mottek On Money on 790 KABC.
Headed to SoFi Stadium? Skip the traffic and ride the Culver City Bus Line 99, the SoFi Express, your direct $2 base fare round-trip ride from the Culver City Transit Center at Westfield, Culver City. Buses run on weekend game days every 20 minutes starting 3 hours before kickoff, with return service beginning at the start of the third quarter. And guess what else? We're hiring. Join our team and help keep the community moving. Visit culvercitybus.com or call 310-253-6500 for info on your next ride to the game or maybe your next job.
Hi, I'm Drew Barrymore, and I want to tell you how you can help to support the life-saving work of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. When you give, you're helping ensure families never receive a bill from St. Jude for treatment, travel, housing, or food, so they can focus on helping their child live. This holiday, help St. Jude give children the greatest gift, a chance at a lifetime.
This holiday, help St. Jude find more cures for more children. Donate now at musicgives.org.
The United States Soccer Federation presents the U.S. Soccer Podcast.
A chance to show people a little bit behind the curtain.
Kling, what are we in for?
Such a fun time, so much energy, and you get to actually see people react to the storytelling.
We cover a wide range of topics.
The whole reason we started was we loved playing when we were kids.
I mean, I still got that spark in me.
There you go. But I don't know how you can leave not being a bigger fan.
The U.S. Soccer Podcast. Goal for goal! Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KABC. Hard to believe it's been nearly a full year now since fires started happening in Malibu and then the devastating firestorm in January that hit parts of Malibu, the Palisades, and Altadena. Joining us live now, someone at the front line of the recovery effort, and that is RAUL ANAYA, longtime president and leader of business banking for Bank of America here in Southern California, nowadays heading up B of A's Fire Disaster Recovery Initiative, including the new B of A Rebuild Solution Initiative. RAUL ANAYA, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Frank, thank you for, again, having me on your show. It's always a pleasure and a perfect time for us to chat about everything going on at Bank of America. As you mentioned, it's almost a year when we had those terrible fires. And if you recall, the last time that we were on the show together, 13,000 families were impacted by the fire, and about half of them had some form of a banking relationship with Bank of America. So, when we think about it, we think we're uniquely positioned to help. And as a company that's been in B of A at Los Angeles for over 110 years, we think we're in the unique position of being able to help. We've got experience in dealing with coast-to-coast natural disasters. We've got the expertise, the capital, and connections to help with this recovery. So I'm excited to talk to you about this Bank of America rebuild solution.
Thank you, and thank you for keeping us well informed over the past year and your leadership role in all of this. Zooming out to the big picture, just this week we saw another outpouring of anger and heartbreak, this time at the LA City Council chambers, as the fee waivers apparently were delayed. So a lot of red tape here. Give us your assessment of how this recovery is going and how it can be improved.
Well, look, it's there's so many families that have been impacted with what's happened, and the key thing that they're all families are trying to figure out is this liquidity crunch and how do they preserve cash flow, because at some point they're going to have to they're going to have to resume making payments on their mortgage, right? As you know, all the banks agreed with the governor to provide up to 12 months of forbearance with the governor. And for those families that took up that opportunity, those payments are going to resume here in a couple of months. At the same time, you've got insurance coverage for their temporary housing that's going to likely run out at some point in time, either because they've reached their dollar cap or they reached their 2-year time zone. And so what we call that at Bank of America, we call that the liquidity crunch. And so we've created the Bank of America rebuild solution to specifically address that.
Yes. Let me ask you about that. This is a new initiative, so tell us more about this rebuild solution for your mortgage customers, right?
Yeah. So, we had about 1,000 clients who lost their homes in the fire. Devastating news. I built a team to really think about creative ways to help them. And so those 1,000 clients who lost their homes and have a Bank of America mortgage, what we have done, we just announced this recently, we will give, and those that want to rebuild their home, we will do 3 things. 1, we will give them an additional 2 years of forbearance while they're building their home, so they're able to preserve their cash flow while the house is under construction. 2, we have innovated on a new line of credit called the Rebuild line of credit that's going to serve as a second lien position on their home to be able to provide what is ultimately going to be gap financing so that they can finish their home. Because if you think about what costs are today, they're elevated from where they were a few years ago for a whole bunch of reasons. The second Rebuild line of credit is something that they can use to help finish their home. And 3, we're going to help maintain and preserve their existing low-rate mortgage that they might have had on their underlying mortgage. So at the end of the day, that family that's a Bank of America customer who lost their home and has a Bank of America mortgage with us, they're back in their home while the house is under construction. If they choose to, they don't have to pay any of the payments for up to 2 years. Those accumulated and unpaid payments we will put at the back of the mortgage. 2, we'll extend a Rebuild line of credit to them that they can use to finish construction of the house because they likely need more financing. And 3, that low-rate mortgage, let's say they have a 3% mortgage on that original mortgage, we will preserve that rate so their monthly payments don't change, and instead, they're able to preserve their cash flow during the rebuild period, they're maintaining the same interest rate, and they're back in their home with a new financing structure.
That is such important news.
Yeah, super excited about that. As you can imagine, we are excited to share that with you, and been talking to various community leaders, civic leaders to share this great news.
See it tonight, read about it tomorrow, but hear it now on Mottek On Money, live on the air with RAUL ANAYA, longtime president and leader of business banking for Bank of America here in Southern California, now leading the rebuilding effort. So that is very encouraging news that the forbearance could be extended for another 2 years. That's very, very important. And, of course, B of A also well known for its philanthropy here in the Los Angeles area, and I know you've been helping in many ways the various nonprofit groups. And in fact, I saw B of A on the wall of the Union Rescue Mission when I was there this past week. So I know you're also very active on the homeless front. Tell us about B of A's efforts to help the folks out there.
Well, every year we have provided philanthropic support of $6 to $7 million every year to over 150 nonprofits. Here, because of the LA wildfires, we immediately announced $1 million of grants to help American Red Cross, LA Regional Food Bank, and the LA Chamber of Commerce. Since then, we've announced an additional $2.5 million of grants to nonprofits to help with their basic needs. So as a result of the LA wildfires, and Frank, in a few weeks, I'm going to come back to you and we're going to make another significant announcement that I'd like to share with you. We're finishing up some of the points on this, but it's going to be a multi-million-dollar extension of grants to key people that are going to need this.
Thank you very much, and we're going to keep an open line to you on all of this big news. First and foremost, on this new B of A Rebuild solution, for those who heard that important information and want to take you up on this, what's the best way to connect with B of A and you even directly to follow up on that?
Well, if they go and visit thebankofamerica.com/LA Rebuild, we have a dedicated website that has a wealth of information, various resources, has contact information that they can reach out, and we can sit down. I get one of our bankers to sit down and talk to the family or the interested party about the Bank of America Rebuild solution. Again, providing for those Bank of America customers that have their mortgage with us, lost their home, we will provide, and they want to rebuild, we'll provide an additional 2 years of forbearance. We will provide a rebuild line of credit so they can finish construction of their home because of elevated construction costs. And 3, we will preserve and honor that existing low-rate mortgage that they likely have on their mortgage, whether it's 2.5%, 3%, 3.5%. So it's just our way for us to help the community, because ultimately it's our hope that more Angelenos will choose to stay and rebuild, knowing what options are available to them.
At this time of Thanksgiving, we want to thank you very much, RAUL ANAYA, for keeping us well-informed and breaking that important news here on the air. We wish you and everybody there a wonderful holiday season. And again, we'll keep an open line to you. Thank you very, very much for joining us live here on Mottek On Money on 790 KABC. RAUL ANAYA, longtime president of business banking here in Southern California for B of A on Mottek On Money, 790 KABC.
Headed to SoFi Stadium? Skip the traffic and ride the Culver City Bus Line 99, the SoFi Express, your direct $2 base fare round-trip ride from the Culver City Transit Center at Westfield, Culver City. Buses run on weekend game days every 20 minutes starting 3 hours before kickoff, with return service beginning at the start of the third quarter. And guess what else? We're hiring. Join our team and help keep the community moving. Visit culvercitybus.com or call 310-253-6500 for info on your next ride to the game or maybe your next job.